Aside from who wins the presidential elections on November 5th, one of the most important and controversial questions facing America is what to do with Donald Trump and his legal problems. Because they're not going away. Whether he's elected or not, they've got to be dealt with. And they are serious and they are consequential, and they will have a huge impact on America and America's future. We're going to look at, should Donald Trump be jailed? And in the second half of the video, we're going to look at, will Donald Trump be jailed? Those are two different questions that need to be addressed and answered. Trump has already faced several trials in court, both civil and criminal. To tell you the truth, he hasn't done very well to date. Whether you want to look at the Trump Charity Foundation being deregistered in New York, or allegations against Trump University, or the false financial filings by the Trump Organization, which resulted in a $350 million fine and serious operating restrictions on his companies, or him being found liable for sexually abusing E. Jean Carroll, who was awarded $5 million in damages, and then being further ordered to pay $83 million for defaming E. Jean Carroll about that same case. Then you've got the falsifying records to cover up the payments for the Stormy Daniels affair, which might be the most serious because it was a criminal, not civil case, and Trump was found guilty of 34 charges. So he's a convicted felon. He will be sentenced shortly after the election on those 34 convictions. So that question of what's an appropriate penalty for Trump and should he be jailed is a very real matter that has to be talked about, and a judge has to make a decision, and we're going to talk about that. You've got to remember, he still has not faced the most serious charges against him. He's facing a multi-count indictment in Georgia, state charges for racketeering and election interference. Plus, he has federal indictments, multi-count federal indictments in Florida and in Washington. You know, there's every reason to believe he's going to have further convictions, so he's going to end up being sentenced before judges. Which judges depend on which cases in particular. And judges have a lot of discretion in what kind of penalty they can give. So let's take a look at what goes into determining what penalty somebody gets, whether they end up in jail, on probation, with a fine, what the case may be. Because Trump is going to be facing sentencing. No doubt about it. Okay, so let's turn straight to Donald Trump. Mr. Trump, how do you suggest we deal with people who break the law? What's the right approach to how we handle them in punishment? What do you say?
And when you see these towns, and when you see these thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon, you just see them thrown in, rough. I said, please don't be too nice. Smart people, they're not so stupid, but they have to be taught. Now, if you had one really violent day, like a guy like Mike Kelly, put him in charge, Congressman Kelly, put him in charge for one day, one rough hour, and I mean real rough, the word will get out and it will end immediately. End immediately. You know, it'll end immediately.
It was amazing. That's Trump talking about how he thinks we should deal with shoplifters. Of all the crimes, shoplifting, he basically thinks no trial, no charges, no evidence. Just let the cops have their way with you for an hour or two or a day, whatever the case may be. What a paragon of law and order and justice you are, Mr. Trump. And that's how you think we should deal with people who break the law. He also thinks the same about his opponents. He wants them to face only the harshest penalties possible. No going easy on them. You know, he's got his thing. He basically says here, when I win, those people that cheated will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences, so this depravity of justice does not happen again. That's tough talk. But you know what? We've got to stop and look at the ultimate penalty that he proposes and just how tough he really wants to get and how tough he can get. I want you to watch this and listen to what he has to say.
But we're going to be asking everyone who sells drugs, gets caught selling drugs, to receive the death penalty for their heinous acts, because It's the only way.
It's insane. Look, I'm not here to talk about or defend drug traffickers or the problems with drug abuse or the death penalty. But the very thought that you can fight drug abuse by executing drug dealers and drug traffickers is absurd, insane, and barbaric. Most people who sell drugs are not El Chapo or Pablo Escobar. No, it's the kid down it's the kid down the block from you. It's the woman who you work with. It's the mechanic who repairs your car. That's where most people buy their drugs from. Last year, federally, 18,000 people were convicted of drug trafficking. So if Donald Trump has his way, 18,000 Americans a year are going to be executed by the death penalty. It's insane, but it tells you what he thinks is the way to deal with people who break the law. Let's take a few minutes now and look at how a professional, well-trained, experienced judge deals with sentencing people who are convicted felons. Now, many of you have seen this before, but about a week ago, Tina Peters, who is an Arizona elections clerk, well-known Trump election denier, had been convicted and was sentenced to 9 years in prison. And while many of you have seen these clips before, I want you to listen to the words that the judge uses in his sentencing as he explains why he gave that penalty, and every single thing that he says applies to Donald Trump tenfold. So as you listen to these things again, apply them all to Donald Trump, not Tina Peters.
I consider deterrence in sentencing, that is, both general and specific, that the sentence I impose must deter Ms. Peters from engaging in similar conduct in the future, but it also must deter others generally from engaging in this type of conduct. I consider rehabilitation where appropriate. I consider punishment where appropriate. I also must ensure that the sentences I impose are consistent among offenders similarly situated, but I must also impose a sentence that is designed to meet Ms. Peters' unique needs.
Now, that's Arizona District Court Judge Matthew Barrett. He's a highly respected and accomplished member of the legal community. As it says here, Judge Barrett is a graduate of the University of Denver, Stern College of Law. He received the Scholastic Excellence Award. After graduation, he practiced the district attorney in the 14th and 9th Judicial District. He was named the Prosecutor of the Year for the 9th District. In 2017, he was named Chief Deputy District Attorney. Matthew also worked for approximately 2 years as a commercial litigator. Matthew was previously the Vice President of the Colorado Bar Association and mentored the little brother through Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Colorado from 2012 to 2018. In the next section, he talks about some of the factors he takes into account about the life struggles that defendants who are normally being sentenced and sitting in the chair in front of him that he normally deals with compared to the one he's dealing with today.
There could be not much in the way of a comparison in terms of the type of sympathy one would extend to Ms. Peters. Those folks didn't have 4 lawyers representing them. They didn't have a team of assistants helping them. They're not getting rides in private jets all over the country. No, the people who sit in that chair suffer, generally speaking, immeasurable trauma in life, struggle mightily with alcohol abuse, substance abuse, mental health struggles, family loss. They come from broken homes. The cards they were dealt were never the cards that you were dealt, Ms. Peters.
Judge Barrett then goes on to explain the severity of the crime and why the sentence must be serious. He goes on to explain that it was the abuse of public trust that was with their position. That means she violated that trust and has to be punished. And it's so appropriate. Please bear with me and listen to these words and think about Donald Trump, because it gives you all the reasons of why Trump must be jailed. And we just hope that one day we'll have a judge saying the same words about him.
No, to the contrary, Ms. Peters, you are a privileged person. You are as privileged as they come. And you use that privilege to obtain power, a following, and fame. Your lies are well documented, and these convictions are serious. I'm convinced you would do it all over again if you could. You're as defiant as a defendant as this court has ever seen. One scandal after another followed you in your time as the clerk, and ultimately it was a belief that the echo chamber in which you live couldn't be wrong, among other things, that led you to do what you did here. This thought process, unfortunately, seems to consume so many in our country, regardless of race, gender, political affiliation, or the like, that what it is we hear and think can't possibly be wrong. There are many things in my mind that are crystal clear about this case. You are no hero, you abused your position, and you're a charlatan who used and is still using your prior position in office to peddle a snake oil that's been proven to be junk time and time again. In your world, it's all about you. But at bottom, this case was about your corrupt conduct and how no one is above the law. No one in this country has absolute power. Your position as a clerk and recorder, a constitutional position, does not provide you with a means by which to do your own investigation, to not listen to the judiciary, to not listen to the executives higher than you, to not listen to the legislature who sets the law as it may be. This is nonsense. Our system of government can't function when people in government think that somehow, some way, the power they've been given is absolute in all respects. And that's where you fell. You have no respect for the checks and balances of government. You have no respect for this court. You have no respect for law enforcement. And you do not have respect for your fellow colleagues. You have no qualms with violating the court's orders because you're innocent. Because you didn't do anything wrong. You were just doing your job. It's just more lies. No objective person believes them. No, at the end of the day, you cared about the jets, the podcasts, and the people fawning over you. You abdicated your position as a servant to the Constitution, and you chose you over all else. Yes, you are a charlatan, and you cannot help but lie as easy it is for you to breathe. You betrayed your oath for no one other than you. And this is what makes Ms. Peters such a danger to our community. It's the position she held that has provided her the pulpit from which she can preach these lies. The undermining of our democratic process. The undermining of the belief and confidence in our election systems. It's not about questioning it. No one says you can't question, you can't ask. It's completely different. And if you don't understand that distinction, then there's nothing I can say or do here today that will change your mind. So the damage that is caused and continue to be caused is just as bad, if not worse, than the physical violence that this court sees on an all too regular basis. And it's particularly damaging when those words come from someone who holds a position of influence like you. Every effort to undermine the integrity of our elections and public's trust in our institutions has been made by you. You've done it from that lectern the voting public provided you with. Everything you've done has been done to retain control, influence. The damage is immeasurable. And every time it gets refuted, every time it's shown to be false, just another tale is weaved. And prison is for those folks where we send people who are a danger to all of us. Whether it be by the pen or the sword or the word of the mouth. Prison is where folks go, where punishment is what we're focused on. Because the crime committed is so significant that anything less would unduly mitigate the seriousness of the same. So putting you on probation when you have zero needs that would be met by probation, is the very definition of unduly depreciating the significance of what it is that you've done here, the harm that you've caused our community and continue to cause. Community corrections is the same, so prison is the only place that duly meets the purposes of sentencing in this matter. And therefore, the sentence and judgment of the court is as follows. So it's 8.5 years total, plus the 6 months for a total of 9 years of incarceration.
So that is why Donald Trump should be jailed. But another question is going to be, will he be jailed? Will he be jailed is quite different than should he be jailed. And we're going to move on to that now. Look, it's obvious. If Donald Trump is convicted and found guilty of the charges in a court of law, then he should be sentenced exactly the same as anyone else is. It's a cornerstone of the judicial system, and it can't be bent. Now, what about all this talk by Trump of targeted charges and weaponization of the Department of Justice? Well, that's all bunk, and I think everybody knows it. In reality, most of those investigations were being handled far more leniently than it would be for anyone else who was suspected of a crime. And besides that, it's not the DOJ. They're conducting the trial, but it's not them who are convicting him. It's a jury. It's juries who hear the evidence and unanimously agree that you have broken the law and you're guilty. Judges have a lot of power, not only during the trial, but judges are ultimately the one who will determine what Trump's sentence is going to be. As far as Donald Trump's concerned, any judge who is a Democrat, ever was a Democrat, has a family member who's a Democrat, or ever voted Democrat, should be disqualified and not allowed to sit in the case. I think that goes the same for many Republicans. Unless you're a judge who's going to basically dismiss the case against Trump, you're corrupt and you have no business being on the bench. Before going much further, let's address the elephant in the room. Pardon. A presidential pardon. Is that possible? And what would that mean? Well, some of the charges that Trump faces are at the state level. In New York, where he's been convicted of 34 counts, and in Georgia, where the trial hasn't been held yet. With state charges, the federal government, a presidential pardon wouldn't help him. It would have to be the governor of New York or the governor of Atlanta who would have to pardon him. New York, it's not going to happen. And in Georgia, it's really hard to say, but Donald Trump has done everything he can to offend the people and the Republicans and the sitting governor of the state of Georgia. So I don't really know where that would go. However, his most serious charges are federal, and the only way out of that would be a presidential pardon. Now, if Kamala Harris is elected, I can't see her pardoning Trump, and I would be really surprised to see Biden on his way out offering a pardon to Trump. But make no bones about it, if Donald Trump is elected, he will pardon himself. That's all there is to it. He will have the charges dropped, he will stop the investigation, and he will issue a pardon to himself for any crimes now and in future. It was just this week that we all learned the details of how Donald Trump, during his presidency, killed the FBI investigation background check into Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh, who Trump wanted on the bench, and he basically used his power to tell the FBI, stop, that's it, investigation over. So if he would do it for a Supreme Court judge, just imagine what he'd do for himself. There's no doubt about it, he will do that. But if Trump loses the election and his trials are allowed to proceed, there's a pretty good chance he's going to be convicted, and it will be up to a judge to sentence him the appropriate penalty as the law calls for. Now, knowing his charges, prison time may be the appropriate penalty. And I could see him being sentenced to time in jail. But whether or not he ever serves a day in jail is a whole nother question. There are complications beyond all other matters. The biggest obstacle to Donald Trump spending even one day in jail or prison is the reality that I just don't think there's a facility that exists anywhere that could house an ex-president and the Secret Service detachment that's required to give him his protection. His status as an ex-president doesn't change, even though he is a convict and sentenced to jail. So unless they build a custom facility a la Pablo Escobar and La Catedral, I just don't see Trump spending time in jail. What's likely to happen is some form of house arrest, some form of confinement that you can't leave the premises, is probably the best most people can hope for. May not be satisfying, but it's a reality, and I just don't know if that obstacle can be overcome. Okay, thank you very much for watching, everybody. I love making this content, but there's an amateurish quality to it. I gotta admit, I do this all myself. I do the camera work, the lighting, the scripting, the graphics, the editing, you name it, I do it. So I need your help. Please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, make comments below. I love reading them and I answer them. I'll get more content out soon, and please have yourself a great week.